let's get more on this breaking news story that we have been following here for the past, 10, 12 minutes or so. Global affairs analyst Michael Borsacchio is with me now. We often speak from Ukraine. And Michael, just your reaction, first of all, to what we've heard from Secretary Rubio following these talks in Jeddah with the Ukrainian delegation.
Good to be with you. Stunning. I mean, none of us expected this to happen. We expected a quiet day of talks about technicalities, maybe continuing tomorrow. And we were talking only a few hours ago, perhaps, about that rare earth minerals deal being signed. And that would be the biggest accomplishment from today. But this is mind-boggling. And Mr. Zelensky has delivered his evening address just a few minutes ago, and he said, I'm translating from Ukrainian, this not only calls for cessation of missiles, drones, and bombs, but also cessation of hostilities along the entire front line. And he said Ukraine is ready for peace, but basically he ended by saying the ball is in Russia's court, and let's see what they say. Now, it's hard to add on to our colleagues' great analysis, but I have to say, if one is slightly cynical, and we deserve to be cynical when it talks to Russia and holding to agreements, any pause could, of course, give them time to regroup. And then we also don't know behind the scenes deals. What will Mr. Trump offer to Russia to not only bring them back to the table, but to cease fire and talk to the Ukrainians about peace?
Yeah, and the big concern, and something that we have spoken about, and we've spoken to Nic at great length as well. We saw the president, we saw the French president, we saw Prime Minister Starmer going to the United States, and pretty much all diplomacy push that we've seen in the past 2 weeks across Europe. It's this point over security guarantees, or what they also Europeans like to call a backstop. I mean, if you're one of those leaders right now today, and you're seeing this broad agreement with a lack of specifics, Michael, do you take this as the initial first step? You're happy, and then you work on the details. How do you make sense of this supposed agreement?
Sure. Well, you see, in the old days, that would have been an easy question to answer. But we're now in a scenario where Mr. Trump will say one thing 1 minute and do something else the next. I mean, look at my home country, Canada, what just happened. Ontario slapping the United States, the northern states, with extra tariffs for electricity. And then Mr. Trump firing back with outlandish tariffs. So that's where we're in right now. And, you know, again, I want to feel positive about this and optimistic, but we have to remember that Mr. Trump is prone to changing his mind, and he may overrule his team and go back. And then one more other slight thing is we're not quite sure if this is the total resumption of military aid. It could be, for example, one small pot of presidential authority funding. That's another kind of thing in the weeds here too.
Yeah, stay with us. I'm seeing that Andriy Yermak, the Ukrainian's presidential chief of staff, messaging is basically saying protecting Ukraine's interests is the most important thing for us. A just peace is the key for us. We want peace. Thank you for a constructive meeting. And stay with us, because I want to just bring Nic Robertson into this conversation as well, Nic. And, you know, the reason why we are talking, we are holding back or slightly reticent, Michael Borsacchio there, is because we have been here before with a ceasefire. And that was broken too. And we heard President Zelensky making that point when he went to the White House. Speak to that.
These ceasefires are very, very complex things. It's not just enough to say that everyone stops shooting. OK, that works on day one, day two. And I'm sure Michael is very intimately versed with how these things fall apart. The mechanism last time during the ceasefire, there was Minsk 1 and Minsk 2, which interestingly, Russia was at the table as an independent status. Anyway, that's another story. But what happened was you make the small guns stop firing, and then you pull back the bigger guns, 12 kilometers from the front line or 20 kilometers and things like that. But to do that, you need people to verify it. Who's going to verify it? Who's going to verify it on the Russian side? Last time, the Russians verified the Ukrainians who were fighting against their government. So the Russians going to verify their own pullback of weapons?
Yeah.
How does even that work? And even last time, it didn't work.
Yeah.
So I'm troubled by the lack of detail. It shouldn't trouble me, but as Michael was saying, past what we've seen, how Russia behaves in these situations, don't take anything at face value.
Michael, I mean, we are troubled by the lack of detail because as journalists, we like detail. We also want to know this tells us whether there's any hope of this actually sticking, right? At the moment, though, just taking this first step, you're often in Ukraine. We often speak from Ukraine. How would this be received, you think, by Ukrainians?
Yeah, excuse me. Well, right now, very skeptically, and I'll tell you why. Just checking my Telegram feed right now in Ukrainian is a ballistic missile hit Odessa in the past hour or so. So presumably the Russians would have received some advance word of this peace deal. Why would you start shooting ballistic missiles again? But you know, for sure, the Ukrainians want nothing more than peace right now, because it's been very, very bad on a daily and nightly basis with hundreds and hundreds of drones and missiles. If I could go back quickly to what Nic was saying there, when I was, now a couple of things here. It may be just purely coincidence, but the Secretary General of the OSCE, the organization I used to work for, who could be tasked, at least in part, to monitor a ceasefire, is in Moscow today, or was in Moscow today. So the Russians actually took him around to see some of the damage from that massive overnight Ukrainian drone strike, and basically said to him, see, this is how the Ukrainians act. But the other thing Nic was talking about, these are very, very difficult things to monitor. I remember when I was with the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission in Ukraine 2014, 2015, when we had ceasefires or some kind of agreements, we would literally have observers with measuring tapes to measure the width of a gun barrel or things like that to see if there are any violations. So that speaks to the kind of effort, the kind of trained eyes and expertise, not to mention bravery, of course, as well, to go out there and monitor these things. This is a very, very much longer front line now as well. So it would take a lot of monitoring muscle to make sure there's compliance from both sides.
Michael Borsuk, you appreciate it. Thank you, Michael. And just very